this is the way I suspect that he kind of saw things. Um, you know how there's certain concepts that we learn at a young age, like a table or chair. Those are examples of concepts, right? They sort of happen through a process of differentiation and integration is what we do, right? You're a little kid and you don't know anything, and you're like, you got this look that kids have. Yeah, and they just like, and then they cry and poop. So somewhere in between there, what they're doing is they're seeing things and going, similar things, but different. Similar but different. It's kind of like they walk around doing that and they go, oh, a flat surface with legs, you know? I see these things with flat surfaces and legs. That's very different than the dog, which also has legs. They're similar but different. They both have 4 legs, but this is a dog and this is a different thing, right? Maybe it's a table, maybe it's a chair. And so you get like, and this is total, like, I'm going into joke but serious kind of fantasy BS here. You've got, okay, now we differentiate between dogs and tables. We can see their similarity, but they're conceptually 2 different things now, right? Now you notice that a lot of the tables, like they can be various heights, right? Some are very short. In fact, some tables people don't put things on. Some tables people sit on. And you go, well, maybe that's not a table. Like you can see they have a different purpose. They have a different function. These kind of tables are for sitting on. We'll call those chairs, right? They're a flat surface with legs, but they have a different purpose. They exist for a different reason. That's what is the essential characteristic? The fact that it's got 4 legs and a flat surface, or its purpose. Well, those are kind of hand in hand because its purpose, its function is facilitated by its form. Like you couldn't sit on it if it was taller than the table. You couldn't use the table if it was taller than the table. Maybe you couldn't get on it even if it's that high above your backside. Anyway, so you start to kind of like, this is like a process. And then what happens is you notice that there's tons of different kinds of chairs. There's like the lazy chairs. There's the bar stool chairs, which you haven't differentiated from stools yet because they seem essentially the same. The essential characteristic is that it's something that people sit on, right? Then you start to see, oh, well, they don't all have 4 legs. Some have 3, right? Some are tall, some are short. Maybe you find some that are stone at a park, or I don't know. Maybe you find some are long that can hold many people. There's some they've got them in cars. Anyway, but then you can kind of make those distinctions later. It's just you continually have more complex concepts as you have more differentiation and integration. An example of integration is when you say, like, you got tables and you have like triangular tables and half circle tables, stone tables, plastic tables that are neon green for little kids or whatever they are. And you go, essentially, they're all the same. They're all tables. They all have the same purpose, right? And then what you do is you group them all up. Infinite number of tables, right? All the tables in China that you've never seen, all the tables in Europe that you've never seen, they're all tables, So it's a generalization. It's in a way, if you want to think about it that way. Anyway, the point is, there are things like this that are kind of, we take them for granted. Axiomatic, like, the self-evident, things that you never really thought to question, things you just knew to be true. You didn't always know they're true because, there's a time you didn't even exist. And then when you did, you had to start to form these concepts over time. Like you had to see them or hear things or whatever you're doing. You're using your senses to perceive the world around you. And then based on those perceptions, you develop and form concepts. You know what I'm saying? Some concepts are really simple, and some concepts are built from combining other concepts into like more complex concepts. Anyway, examples of things that you just take for granted would probably be things like table and chair, It's never been a mystery to you, really. There's probably a ton of things like that. The way I get the impression that with Bach, he had, I think he kind of probably formed it in some of the same years, the same early years. Mozart too, guys like that. But basically, I get the impression when I look at Bach's music, when I transcribe some of it or put some of it into recording software and whatever else, or when I'm playing it on piano or whatever it is, just looking at it or playing it, you can notice a few things. One is that he changes key so easily and so effortlessly. And there's certain things he does a lot. There's certain things that people did at the time. You know, he didn't invent the automobile without having invented, like, how do I say this? There was already wheels in existence when the automobile was an idea. You know what I mean? So there was like some knowledge that was around, you know, like what people would do when they would write polyphonic music, which means multiple melodies, right, at the same time. That's kind of maybe a simplification, but the idea is you'd have a melody like "Happy Birthday to You," you know, and it would go through the melody, and usually at the end of it, the other one, a second voice would come in with that melody, while your first melody would go on to a new subject, which would be called like a counter subject. So you'd have a subject come in with one voice, and then when that subject is finished, it begins a counter subject, and right at that time when it does a counter subject, a second voice comes in with the original subject, and that subject and that counter subject, they have to coexist, and that in a sense is easy to do, right? Because you could just write any melody and then any second melody and then just overlap them. What's not easy is to make it sound harmonious, right? Because it's going to sound like noise. It's going to clash. Because you're going to have seconds and maybe flat seconds and maybe sevenths, and it's just going to be a mess. And so the art form for him was basically maintaining that like consonant to dissonant to consonant kind of relationship that you hear, where you have tensions and resolutions, kind of like we expect today. In pop music, maybe we don't really expect any dissonance ever anymore, but even 10, 20 years ago, you would, you know. Anyway, so he somehow, I mean, and there's sort of techniques you can do. I don't think anybody really knows I don't think anybody knows as well as he did. Nobody's done it as well as he had. Nobody since him has done like memorable melodies. Like, I mean, even memorable is sort of a relative word these days. People conflate memorable. They think of memorable as catchy, and if they can't remember very much, then it's not very catchy. So it's as catchy or memorable as a person's ear is developed, you know, to retain melodies and stuff. But you know what I mean? Like that song E.T., the melody goes by Katy Perry. It goes bum 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 dun 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 dun. That's basically the verse. And people go, it's catchy. Well, it's one note. You can remember it because, you know, how could you forget it? And they call it so catchy because it's like if I was dropping water on your head, like, and you were just chained down, and you'd still feel the pain after the water was gone or the finger, you know. It's like you could never forget that. If you do it to you for 20 years or something, you know what I mean? And which seems like what the music industry is now. Anyway, but talk about tangent. He modulates easily. He's got multiple melodies going on at the same time. It's very insane. And not only is it, but the melodies are kind of, I would say, really distinct, like memorable. You can, you know, even if it's like this is a bad example because maybe not the most memorable melody he's ever had. You know that one? Just that like. That's an example of a that's I think the fourth invention, 2-part invention. I'd check that out. I mean, listen to the inventions and symphonias, which are just 3-part inventions. You can get like they're called the books or whatever, like 2-part and 3-part inventions. And I recommend listening to Glenn Gould play him just because I think he's sort of the best interpreter of Bach. What do you mean? Oh. Yeah, the way he plays is really it's without any BS. Like a lot of people, like they randomly speed up and slow down because randomness and arbitrariness is kind of what they equate as being emotion. But the way he plays it's I don't know, it's so much better. Anyway, things like that, being able to modulate, write independent melodies. We in our era we think of things in like vertical ways, like well, this chord to this chord to this chord to this chord, and we'll have it. That'll be a song, like that's we're thinking vertical, block, block, block. And then you go, yeah, that's the riff, and then somebody will come up with a melody over it, and so that's Bach did that sometimes too, like they weren't as like detached in that way. My G major chord and my C really sus2 chord. Like each one of those voices would have to get to the next chord in a logical way,